Contract management is an important component of asset management. In addition to managing the expiration and the terms and conditions associated with the contract, you can identify the assets that are covered under the contract. Let's take a look. Here we have a contract for leased devices with Lenovo. Under the Assets Covered Related list, you can add assets that are covered by the contract. So here we can identify the asset that's covered. I'll grab a Lenovo device here that I know the asset tag for. And you need to identify a date added. I will just set it to today for now and submit. Because that date added is a required field, this related list does not use a list collector to allow you to add those assets. And as you might guess from watching me do that, adding a large number of assets in this way could take a significant amount of time. If you have a large number of assets covered by the contract, you might want a faster method to add covered assets. One way to handle this is to use an import set. You need 3 pieces of information for the import, and I've got a spreadsheet prepared here. You need to have the date added, the asset itself, and the contract. The contract number is easy. I grab that from the form. I'll just copy that, switch back over to my spreadsheet, and paste it in. You can paste it into multiple fields at once after you paste it into one field. I'll drop that contract in. So I've got a large number. I've got about 50 assets that I want to add to this contract. The asset on the import should be the same as the display name for the asset. Now, the easiest way to do this is to create a list of those assets. We can create a list of those assets. We'll just come in here. Just come in here to Hardware Assets. And because the display name contains the model name, which contains the manufacturer, we can filter on those devices that have Lenovo in the display name. This gives us a list of devices. We could apply additional filters if necessary to get just the items that we want. And at this point, we can export this list to an Excel file. Download that file. Lenovo hardware, just so I have that identified. Download that file. Open it up. And I can grab that display name. So I will grab 50 of these. Let's see, I'm starting at row 3, so I'm going to go to row 53. Copy that and drop it right into my spreadsheet for the import. So I've got my assets all identified. Oh, looks like I grabbed one more than I needed. I'll just pull that out so I don't include that extra information in the import. And now I have a spreadsheet that I can use for import. I'm going to save this spreadsheet now. Now the date, that final item is the date. The date can be a little tricky. You can enter the added date into the spreadsheet to import, but dates are very particular when you import them. I've included the dates here, and in just a moment we'll look at how to handle these dates on the import. From here, we'd use the import process to load the data, then we'll create a transform map and then transform the data. So I'll go to import sets, load the data, and I'll create a new covered assets. And I'm going to choose that Excel file. Here's the for contract import spreadsheet that I was working with. Open that up. and go. So that data is now being loaded into that temporary table, U covered assets. And now we need to create a transform map. Add assets to a contract. And the target table here is asset covered. You'll notice here there is the asset covered for the contract asset. There's also, you can also do this for rate cards as well. We'll just do the asset covered here and use the auto map matching fields. See if that gets us our matchup. And you see that we do get the contract, the date added, and the asset. Now we don't want to necessarily coalesce on anything. Hopefully all of our values are unique. For the assets and for the contract, we actually want them to be the same unless we're adding for multiple contracts at once. You can do that as well. And I'm going to actually delete the date added here because we're going to handle that through a script. As I mentioned, the system is very particular with regards to the date added. And so what we will do is we'll handle that with a transform script. I'm going to set the transform script, create a new one. We're going to run this on before, so it handles it very early on in the transform process. And I've got the script already available here. We can paste it in. All this script is doing is creating a new date object. It's taking and setting a variable of date added, and it's taking that variable and setting it to the value in the spreadsheet, that date added. But notice it is U date added because it was created in that user table that we identified. And it's setting it to a string value, and then it's setting the target from the target table. The field name was just added, and setting the value there. So I'll submit this. And now the transform is ready to run. You can run the transform. Run the transform. And then we can go back to our contract. It was a lease contract. View the contract. And we can see now we've got 51 assets covered. Those are the Lenovo assets that we had in the spreadsheet. And the date added is also set based on those values that were in the spreadsheet as well. We've now imported a large number of devices and associated them with the contract automatically. And these links do take us back if we wanted to see the assets themselves. The link does take us to the related asset. Now, if we wanted to, instead of using a date from the spreadsheet, wanted to set the date added for all of the covered assets to today, the current day that you're adding it, you can simply replace these 3 lines with a single line that sets that target added field to now. We have this, which will get today's date, and it will put it in automatically, and that will set that date added to all of those covered assets to today's date. So update this. And then the next step, run through the load data again. Instead, you can use the existing covered assets that you created earlier. You can choose your file and go. I'm just using the same file. In this case, it's going to ignore that date added field. So the transform that's been loaded, now we can run the transform and transform it. All right, the transform is complete. When we return to the contract, I've deleted the covered assets to re-add them here. We can see the assets are covered again, 50 of them, and the date added instead of pulling from the spreadsheet is now set to today. Now this process can be used to add users covered by the contract as well, or it could also be used to add users and assets covered by rate cards. So if you're looking for a more expedient way to add a large number of assets or users to contracts or contract rate cards, you can use this same process. I will add the details to the blog post associated with this on which tables you would be using for that, and I hope you find this information useful.